So before we jump in and start to look at these policies, the first thing I want to do is jump down to quarantine policy. And I'd like to define one of these and kind of look at each one of these settings so you can kind of match it to your organization. So if I click on add a custom policy here, call it model test. So in the recipient's message, how do we want our end users to be able to look and view the quarantine? So if in limited access, the recipients can view quarantine messages, but they cannot release messages from the quarantine state. They'll have to request it. Now, for maybe some advanced users, we can specify what release actions they have. We can allow the recipient to request it to be released, or we can allow the recipient to release the message from quarantine themselves. And you can have multiple policies applied to, different groups of people. Maybe our standard users, maybe we don't want them to be able to request it at all, or we want them to be able to view it. They could delete it, they could preview it, or they could block the sender, but they have to request from an IT administrator to release that. But maybe we have some developers that, work with a lot of third parties, and maybe they need to have some special access so they can release their own, or a special group inside your organization that we want to reduce the frustration of them having to request that email to be released from quarantine, and we can allow them to release it themselves. So that's just a decision that you'd have to make within your organization. So I'll just make this one. They can delete it, they can preview it, they can block it, but they have to request it from an IT administrator. And I'll show you how that comes into play here in a minute. One of the other pieces here, if you look up here in global settings under the quarantine policy, we can set who the sender's name is, the sender address, subject, kind of disclaimer language. We can also add a company logo, and then we can set the end user spam notifications. So is it within 4 hours? Is it once a day? All right. So here you can see that previously we looked at the strict and the standard. Those are both off. And then there's this anti-phish one that's on by default. And then once again, as we go through these policies, there's a lot of commonalities between them. Who are the users, the groups or domains that we want to target? Maybe this one, we want the whole domain. And here's where we can start to look at that phishing threshold, right? The default value, the severity of the action taken on the message depends on the degree of confidence. So we can start to increase this: more aggressive, most aggressive. We can enable all the users, domains, mailbox intelligence for impersonation. I would go ahead and turn this on, and the enable spoof intelligence too. When we get to the actions here, if the mailbox intelligence detects an impersonated user, do we want to redirect it, move it to the junk folder? Do we want it to quarantine? And if we quarantine here, what is that quarantine policy that we want to do? And that's why I set the quarantine policy, so we can set it in here. If the message is detected as a spoof, what do we want to do? If we quarantine it, what policy do we want it to take? The safety tips, I think these are good to turn on as part of, different security and awareness training ideas. or tips for the users. So that if this is the first time they've been contacted by that, it's going to have a tip. Unauthenticated senders for spoof. Show those tags. We can review what those are and submit that. So then as you start going through all these different policies, right, you can see the granularity that you're going to have with anti-spam, anti-malware, safe attachments, and safe links. So with safe attachments, it's going to look at how, let's look at this built-in one here. Let's just create one. Once again, who are we going to target? When you start to look at these, this is how it's going to look at messages when they come in and how it's going to deal with attachments, right? So monitor and block actions might cause a significant delay in the message delivery. Dynamic is only available for recipients with hosted mailbox. For block or dynamic delivery, messages with detected attachments are quarantined and they can be released only by an admin, right? So what is something that you would look for in your organizations? Attachments will not be scanned by SAFE. We will monitor the message, deliver the message if malware is detected and tracked and scanning results. And then once again, what is that quarantine policy? Everything kind of goes back to that. How do we want our organization to behave whenever those are scanned and brought into the organization? So one other thing with the safe links and safe attachments. So sometimes threat actors will generate new domains and have malicious content on that new domain that hasn't been scanned, that hasn't been rated, that's not been added to any of the signatures or anything that Microsoft has. Well, if one message is delivered and later is found to be malicious, right, because they want to get those links delivered and not make them malicious until they can at least get one or two delivered inside of these safe links using like the 0-hour auto purge or ZAP. It'll know each mailbox that those messages were delivered to and be able to reach into all those mailboxes that have been delivered and pull that message out. Show you that here. It's anti-malware. Here you can, in this anti-malware, look at these different file types. You'll be able to add other file types here, but here's that piece right here for that enable 0-hour auto purge. And what this does is once, you know, those signatures or those hash files or any of those indicators of compromise are detected after delivery, this will allow it to automatically reach back out to those mailboxes and pull those messages out. So then looking at that here, if you already have some of these, if you want to go in, you can go back and look at that and make sure that you have